Hello, all. Welcome back to Black Girl Magic Book Chat Halloween Edition. My name is Larissa. I'm the African American Resource Center Coordinator, and every week this month, I have been reading a different book in the genre of horror, or thriller, or mystery, or sometimes all of them, um, in celebration of one of my favorite holidays, which is Halloween, which is 1 week away, which means that we are in week 4 and we have one more week left. And so I have one more book. As always, it's been so fun to read all of these books. And so I'm excited to share with you this week's. So this week, or last week rather, I dove, pun intended, into this YA novel called We Don't Swim Here. Is that lame? So We Don't Swim Here is a YA, which means young adult for those who don't know. A young adult novel, so it is geared towards kind of teenagers, mid to late teens, maybe early 20s, but typically teenagers because the characters are in high school. So I read this, We Don't Swim Here, by Vincent Tirado. I think that's how their name is pronounced. It was an interesting read, if sometimes a little confusing. Um, and as always, the social commentary I find in horror books by Black and African American authors are always so intriguing because they're always so spot on. So this book follows two cousins, Bronwyn and Ananias, who are both around 16, I think, high school juniors or something like that. Um, And when their grandmother, Lala, gets sick, Bronwyn, who lives in Illinois with her parents, moves down to Arkansas where Anais lives with her parents, and then Lala lives in Arkansas as well. So they move down. It's for 1 year. Bronwyn obviously is like, oh my God, like I have a life here. I'm not excited about moving down, but she loves her grandmother. So she's like, okay, I could do it for a year. Um, Bronwyn and Anais have not been close since they were kids. So when Bronwyn goes, she's kind of like, I don't know anybody. Like, yeah, I know who Anais is, but we're not friends really. We're not close. We're cousins, but we don't really have a relationship. And they haven't been close since they were little girls. When something kind of weird happens, when Anais visits Bronwyn in Illinois, and they go to the community pool. So this weirdness that happens at the community pool, this sort of I guess fear that Anais has of swimming, kind of foreshadows the situation when they go to Arkansas. And so they're in this town called, I think it's Hillside. They're in this like little soft town. One of the things I've noticed about horror movies is that so often they're set in these like really small towns, which is like kind of crazy. And I want to see a horror book set in New York City. Somewhere big and busy and like I don't know. But anyway, I digress. So we're in this small Arkansas town. Um, and so Bronwyn goes down, and like I said, that weirdness at the community pool sort of foreshadows what's going to happen, um, or like what this town sort of believes. And they've got this motto, and it's "We don't swim here." Um, and that's a problem for Bronwyn, who is a swimmer. That's her sport of choice. And she is gunning for Olympic swimmer stardom, right? She wants to be in the Olympics. And so when she goes down and they, like, one of the first things they tell her is that, like, we don't swim here, she's not pleased. And once she starts schools, she really starts to see this complete lack of swimming pools and this total fear of the lake. And that isn't the only strange thing that happens in this town. The people are super cryptic and very secretive, and they don't trust outsiders. In fact, they are downright hostile to outsiders. And Anais is not even really different, even though Bronwyn is her cousin. In a lot of ways, she's very hostile to Bronwyn, or maybe not hostile, but very secretive, very cryptic, and Bronwyn's not pleased. The townspeople seem to survive on this sort of these like little rituals and these little rules that they have, and the kids are super into it. It's interesting. And the parents and the adults, they sort of act like things aren't happening in the way that, like, when we read books about kids, the adults are kind of removed. But in some spaces, we do know that the adults recognize that something strange is happening because they are also of the mind that we don't swim here. And whenever Bronwyn mentions swimming, they're like, um, and so the people who live here hate when other folks come into town. Um, and so they have these odd little rules and these odd little rituals, as well as this odd little thing of sacrificing tourists, who, according to them, would ask like too many questions. Don't ask questions. If you're here, you keep your head down and you don't wonder what's going on. And so sometimes people just go missing from this town and don't come back, or don't go back to their homes. Um, and so Bronwyn gets involved in whatever is happening in this town deeper than she realizes as she starts to research and understand this town's past. And one of that motto, that "we don't swim here" motto, starts to make a little bit more sense because she realizes that there was a girl years and years ago, a black girl who was killed, who was murdered in a community pool, or people watched, terrified, sure, but they watched. And when, after everything had happened, that death was just ruled a drowning. And her ghost has been kind of holding this town hostage, holding this town and its people hostage since then. So, that's it for the plot of it, because, I don't want to say too much, but that's kind of what we see. And so I will say that this book was like not my favorite of the ones that I've read this month. There was little moments of confusion, like with the rules and the rituals. I don't think I ever completely understood exactly what they were, or even why they did them. Um, and one of the cousins, I was not always a fan of, particularly how she handled some of the situations. And to be fair, she's 16, a teenager. So, like, you can understand that her decision making skills are not always great. Because, sometimes mine aren't. And I'm older than that. But there were moments where she would frustrate me, and I'd be like, that's why this is happening, because you won't, you know? But as I always say, what I do like is the commentary that you get out of these books, the social commentary, because it's always so spot on. Um, so this book kind of commented on Black people's sort of complicated relationship with pools and with swimming, which is like, have you ever read a book like that where like a horror novel that's like based on that history of swimming for Black people? No, like, that's cool, that's smart. Um, so back when things were legally segregated, Black people were not always allowed to swim in the community pools, or even the community, like the lakes or what have you. They would only be allowed on certain days and times, if they were even allowed. The pools were segregated, and so sometimes the Black pools were obviously, dirtier, or sometimes there was no water. And then, those pools that maybe they shared, the white people did not want them to swim. They didn't want to swim in the same pools, even if they weren't swimming at the same time. So they drained them. There was even this incident I read about. I always do a little bit of research after the book, but there was this incident that I read about where in Florida in the 60s, in 1964, a man literally poured acid into a pool full of Black folks, and there were some white people in there too. But they poured acid into this pool. He poured acid into this pool, because these Black people, and some white folks, were protesting the white only rule for this swimming pool. Can you imagine like swimming in a pool and somebody literally, like, you watch somebody literally pour acid into that pool? Um, so this book looks at that legacy, of, something like that, of what can happen to a town haunted by the product of that sort of evilness, you know? So in that regard, I thought this was a really cool book. Um, and it is a YA novel, so not necessarily for me, but I appreciated what it did, right? Even if sometimes I was a little bit lost. But overall, I give it 3 out of 5 stars if I had to rate, but I don't tend to like to rate because rating is super subjective, and I could read it again and change my rating. You know what I mean? So as I always say, love the commentary. So I always get something out of it. You all, please go read it and tell me what you think. It's not a hard read. I actually read it in a matter of like a day. Really, I don't tell anybody, but sometimes I get to read at work. Most librarians don't. That's a myth that we just get to read at work all day. We do not. But I did get to read this book at work because I had to finish it. So I was able to get that done. Next Thursday is Halloween, like I said, and it's our final installment of Black Girl Magic Book Chat, Halloween edition. I'm reading a book by Tananarive Due. I hope I pronounced it right. I'm gonna Google how to pronounce it. I have been like y'all. I've been wanting to read something that she's written for a very long time. So I am super, super excited to read it and to share it with y'all because I know it's going to be amazing because everything I've heard about her works is that she's just like the bomb.com. So I will be back for my final installment next Thursday on Halloween. And I can't wait to share that with y'all. Bye.